I walked into his quarters, expecting a lazy mess, but what I found instead was a man, sleeping, his tool hanging out beside him. Not a power tool, not a wrench, but something more personal. At first, I thought it was a cultural custom. You know, like a greeting or a ritual. After all, I've heard that humans are into strange things. But this didn't look like any tool I've seen on my home planet. And I'm an expert on tools. I had been assigned to clean up after him, as per the usual order of things. I had no idea what a disaster his quarters would be, nor did I understand just how deep his lazy habits ran. The ship's AI had given me a detailed list of tasks, but nothing had warned me about the chaos I would find inside. The human, who went by the name Jax, was notorious for his messy habits. His reputation stretched across galaxies. Human explorers are known for their lack of order, and apparently, he was the epitome of that stereotype. His quarters were covered in empty snack containers, scraps of old tech, and what looked like a half-finished project scattered across the floor. I'd heard about the quirks of human behavior before, but nothing prepared me for this. And then there it was, right beside him, this odd tool. It looked like a device meant for maintenance, yet it had personal connotations. It was sleek, shiny, and strangely familiar, yet I couldn't place where I'd seen something like it. The thing was unmistakably human in its design. I wasn't sure if it was a tool or, in human culture, some sort of custom? A piece of technology or an intimate artifact? I couldn't help myself. I needed to investigate further. Gently, I reached for it, trying not to disturb him. The human was a heavy sleeper, something I had heard from the AI, but I still wanted to be careful. The tool had a smooth, metallic texture, and as I held it in my hand, I couldn't help but notice how sturdy it felt. There was something about it that felt off, but my confusion made me more intrigued. My people are raised to be respectful. We're taught that understanding other cultures is essential, even if we don't always agree with their customs. I'd seen humans before, of course, but nothing had prepared me for this. What was it about their technology that seemed so intimate? It was almost as if I was holding something far more personal than I'd initially thought. Maybe it was some sort of invitation. I glanced at the human. His face was peaceful, his breathing steady. But now, I was unsure. Was this part of a human ritual? Could the tool be an offering? I had no idea, but I wasn't going to make a mistake. I decided that the best course of action was to treat the tool with the utmost care. I couldn't possibly disrespect whatever meaning it had. Maybe this was how humans greeted one another, offering their tools as a sign of peace or goodwill. I looked at the human again. Still sleeping. His body language suggested he wasn't aware of the importance of the situation. Perhaps he was accustomed to people not understanding his culture, and this tool was just another part of that. Maybe it was meant to signify something only a human would understand. I felt a sudden surge of curiosity. Was this the right thing to do? Should I inspect it further? Or should I leave it alone and wait for the human to explain? I took a breath. If I was going to clean, I needed to know what I was dealing with. This tool, whatever it was now my responsibility. I had to make sure I respected it and treated it according to whatever human standards applied. So, with a steady hand, I began to examine it more closely. My fingers brushed along its surface, and I marveled at its design. There were intricate grooves, a pattern that seemed almost deliberate. Maybe it wasn't just a piece of technology. Perhaps it was something more. I didn't want to be rude, but my curiosity got the best of me. I needed to understand. Suddenly, the human shifted. His eyes fluttered open. I froze, my hand still hovering over the tool, which, despite my care, was now in a slightly different position. I quickly withdrew my hand, embarrassed, but the human didn't immediately react. He looked at me with bleary eyes and then back at the tool. A look of confusion spread across his face. He cleared his throat. Can I help you?" I was flustered. This wasn't how I had imagined this moment would go. The human was clearly aware of my presence, yet still, I couldn't help but feel awkward. Was he upset? Did he understand that I was just trying to understand? I quickly tried to explain. Is this something important? I asked, gesturing to the tool, which now felt like a heavy weight between us. I was careful to keep my voice neutral, but I could hear the edge of nervousness in it. I didn't mean to disturb your ritual. He stared at me for a moment, his eyes widening in sudden realization. Oh no! No, it's a tool. A repair tool, he said quickly, as if to defuse my misunderstanding. It's just for fixing things around the ship. Not what you think. Not what I think, I repeated, confused. This wasn't making sense. How could something so personal, so designed, be just a tool? The human seemed genuinely distressed by my misunderstanding, but I still didn't know what to make of it. But it's out. And it looks like it's for other things. I felt my words slipping awkwardly from my mouth, and I cringed at how they sounded. The human, now fully awake and sitting up, looked at the tool with wide eyes, his face flushing. No. It's for fixing the ship, he repeated, his voice strained. I swear. I couldn't help myself. I glanced at the tool again, my curiosity getting the better of me. Are you sure? Because it doesn't look like something for fixing things. He groaned and buried his face in his hands. This is not how I expected this to go. And there it was. The misunderstanding had already snowballed, and neither of us knew how to get back to reality. What had started as an innocent inquiry had quickly spiraled into something far more awkward. The human was desperately trying to explain himself, but his efforts only seemed to make the situation more ridiculous. I gave him an apologetic look, not sure if I was the one who should be embarrassed, or if it was him. So this is just a tool? Just a tool, he confirmed, his voice flat. Well then, can I clean it? I asked, pointing to the rest of his quarters. I suppose I should start with everything else. The human gave a deep sigh and nodded. Yeah, sure. Just don't mess with the tool, all right? I nodded and took a step back, still unsure what to think. I had my orders to clean, and that's what I would do. But this wasn't how I imagined my first day on a human ship. Not at all. As I began to tidy up his room, I couldn't help but glance back at the tool every so often. Now, it didn't seem quite as significant. But then again, maybe I was missing something. After all, this was human culture, and who was I to say what was normal or not? I stared at the tool for a long moment, still not sure what to make of it. The human, clearly mortified, seemed desperate to convince me that it was just a piece of equipment for fixing things, but it didn't feel like just a tool. The more I looked at it, the more absurd it seemed. How could something that looked so personal be something as mundane as a maintenance device? I swear, he said again, sitting up fully now and rubbing his face as if trying to shake off the grogginess. It's just a wrench. It's for, fixing the engine on my ship. I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. Fixing the engine? I asked skeptically. Is that what you call it? Yeah, he stammered, clearly embarrassed now. He seemed like he didn't know how to explain it further without digging himself into a deeper hole. It's specialized. Very specific. I could hear the hesitation in his voice. There was something off about his explanation, but I couldn't put my finger on it. My people don't make such mistakes. When we use a tool, it's because we know exactly what it's for. If the human was telling the truth, why was he acting so strangely? It didn't make sense. I glanced back at the tool, still on his bed, its metal surface gleaming under the soft light of the room. It wasn't like any wrench I had seen before. The design was almost ergonomic, like it was meant to be handled comfortably, and there were strange symbols etched into the handle. They almost seemed deliberate, as if they meant something more. This wasn't a regular maintenance tool, I was sure of it. Maybe I misunderstood, I said, trying to hide the confusion in my voice. I couldn't help myself. I needed to understand what it was. But it doesn't look like something used for ship repairs. It looks, well, more personal. The human groaned and rubbed his temples. Oh, great. Now you think it's something weird, huh? He ran a hand through his hair and shot me a look, as if wondering how I could possibly have misunderstood something so simple. Well, it's hard to know what to think when, it's hanging out like that, I said, motioning toward the tool. It's not exactly subtle, is it? He sighed heavily, leaning back against the bed frame. I didn't mean for you to see it like that. It's just a tool. A very specialized tool, he emphasized, his face flushing redder by the second. I didn't respond immediately. I was still trying to wrap my mind around the whole situation. If it was just a tool, then why did he look so uncomfortable? And why was he acting so strange about it? So, I ventured cautiously. How does it work? The tool, I mean. Does it require special care? My voice trailed off awkwardly. I had no idea how to approach the subject without sounding strange. The human looked at me for a moment, then let out a small, nervous laugh. Special care? No, it's just a tool. I mean, it doesn't need care. It's just, like I said, it's a wrench. For ship repairs. I nodded slowly, trying to process the information. His explanation was starting to make less sense with every passing moment. There was something in the way he said it, like he was overcompensating, like he was trying too hard to convince me. Why was he so concerned about the tool? Was it something more than he was letting on? Okay, so if it's a tool, I said, my voice slow and deliberate, then why do you need it next to you when you sleep? I crossed my arms, watching him with a skeptical look. He froze, his eyes widening. What? No. I don't need it next to me. I mean, it's just where I keep it. I wasn't using it when I was sleeping. I just left it there. I forgot. I didn't buy it. He was clearly nervous, stumbling over his words. There was no way this was just a tool. And if it was, then what kind of human had a tool that required such attention? A tool that could be so easily mistaken for something else? I was starting to feel like I was caught in some kind of cultural minefield. Everything I'd learned about human behavior suggested that they could be strange, but this was something different. I had to figure out what was going on. So, you don't use this tool for other purposes? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual, though inside, I was freaking out a little. This was getting weirder by the minute. The human's face turned even redder, if that was possible. He quickly shook his head. No! I swear. It's not, it's just a tool. It's not anything like that. He stood up, clearly agitated now. Look, this is ridiculous. It's not, whatever you think it is. I didn't say anything for a long moment, my eyes still fixed on the tool. I had to admit, part of me was still curious about it, despite the strange situation. I had never seen anything like it. And that only made me more certain that there was something he wasn't telling me. I stepped closer to the tool, my fingers hovering just above it. I had to know. If it wasn't a tool, then what was it? And why was the human being so defensive about it? The human noticed my movement and immediately lunged toward me, grabbing my arm. Don't touch it, he said, his voice harsh. It's just a tool. For fixing things. I looked at his hand on my arm, then back at the tool. This was all getting way too weird. I stepped back, raising my hands in mock surrender. Okay. I won't touch it. But my mind was racing. What kind of tool was this that could make someone so defensive? It wasn't adding up. He let go of my arm, taking a few steps back and running a hand through his hair in frustration. This is insane, he muttered to himself. I'm just trying to keep things simple. Why does everything with you have to be complicated? I couldn't help myself. Well, it's not my fault if your tool doesn't look like a tool, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop myself. I winced, regretting it immediately. The human shot me a look, his expression a mixture of disbelief and something else. He was clearly flustered, but it was hard to tell if it was because of the tool or because of me. I wasn't sure which one was worse. All I knew was that this situation was getting out of hand, and I was nowhere closer to figuring out what was really going on. The awkward tension hung in the air like a malfunctioning gravity field. He was pacing now, muttering under his breath about misunderstandings and tools, while I tried to keep my composure. My instincts told me there was something deeper at play, though I couldn't decide if it was cultural, personal, or just plain human stubbornness. I watched him wrestle with his embarrassment, noting the way he kept glancing at the tool on the bed like it was the source of all his problems. Maybe it was. Or maybe I was the problem. Either way, the situation wasn't resolving itself. So, I said finally, breaking the silence, if it's really just a tool, why does it seem so significant to you? You act like it's some kind of treasure. He stopped mid-pace, turning to face me with an exasperated look. Because you won't let it go, he said, throwing his hands up. You keep making it into something it's not. It's just a piece of equipment. That's it. Then why are you so defensive? I countered, tilting my head. If it's truly nothing, why not just let me examine it and be done with it? His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might actually let me. But then he shook his head, sighing heavily. You don't get it. It's not about the tool itself. It's about you thinking it's something else. Something weird. Weird? I repeated, raising an eyebrow. What's weird is how much you're overreacting to this whole thing. I've seen plenty of tools before, you know. He groaned and covered his face with his hands. Please don't say it like that. Say it like what? I asked innocently, though I was starting to enjoy his discomfort more than I probably should have. Something about the way he squirmed was oddly entertaining. For someone who claimed to be a seasoned space explorer, he sure wasn't handling this very gracefully. Like it's suggestive, he said, his voice muffled through his hands. You keep making it sound like, never mind. Just forget it. I smirked, unable to resist teasing him a little more. Making it sound like what? That it's more than just a tool. That maybe it's a symbol of something deeper? A reflection of your personality, perhaps? He dropped his hands and shot me a look that could have melted titanium. You're impossible. And you're avoiding the question. I shot back, crossing my arms. If it's really as simple as you say, then why not explain it properly? Or are you worried I might not believe you? His shoulders slumped, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of vulnerability in his expression. It's not that I don't want to explain, he said quietly. It's just complicated. Complicated how? I pressed, softening my tone. As much as I enjoyed teasing him, I didn't want to push too far. There was clearly something bothering him, and I couldn't help but feel curious about what it was. He hesitated, his gaze drifting back to the tool. It's personal, okay? Not in the way you think, he added quickly, as if reading my mind. It's just, it was a gift. From someone I cared about. Someone who's not around anymore. I blinked, caught off guard by the sudden shift in his demeanor. The teasing smile faded from my lips as I realized this was no longer about misunderstandings or awkward humor. This was about something real. I see, I said softly. I didn't know. He shrugged, but the tension in his posture betrayed him. How could you? It's not like I go around telling people about it. It's just one of those things. You know? I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I did. My people didn't place much importance on material objects, but I understood the concept of sentimentality. If this tool was a connection to someone he'd lost, then it made sense why he was so protective of it. I'm sorry if I made things worse, I said after a moment. I didn't mean to pry. He looked at me, his expression softening. You didn't know. And I guess I overreacted. It's just not something I talk about. We stood there in silence for a moment, the tension slowly easing. I glanced at the tool again, but this time, I saw it differently. It wasn't just a strange object or a source of comedy. It was a piece of his story, a reminder of someone who mattered to him. And that made it significant, no matter how strange it seemed to me. Well, I said finally, trying to lighten the mood. If it's that important, maybe you should keep it in a safer place. Leaving it lying around isn't exactly the best way to honor it, is it? He let out a short laugh, the sound breaking through the lingering awkwardness. Yeah, you're probably right. Guess I'm not great at this whole sentimental thing. No kidding, I said with a small smile. But maybe that's something we can work on. He raised an eyebrow. We? Why not? I said with a shrug. You clearly need someone to keep you in line, and I seem to be the only one willing to do it. He chuckled, shaking his head. You're something else, you know that? So I've been told, I said, my tone light but sincere. But seriously, Jax, if it's important to you, then it's important to me too. Deal? He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Deal. For the first time since I'd walked into his room, the tension between us seemed to fade completely. The tool was still there, of course, but now it felt like less of a mystery and more of a connection, a reminder that even the most awkward misunderstandings can lead to something meaningful. And maybe, just maybe, there was more to this human than I'd given him credit for. I watched him carefully, trying to gauge if I had said the right thing. The room had changed. It no longer felt like an uncomfortable standoff, but something more relaxed. The human, Jax, seemed a bit more at ease now that we had cleared the air about the tool. But there was still an undeniable awkwardness in the air, and I wasn't sure how much longer either of us could avoid addressing it. So, I said, shifting the subject, what else should I know about you? I mean, besides your interesting habits? He chuckled, clearly grateful for the change of topic. You mean besides the fact that I leave everything in chaos? Or that I apparently have a thing for weird tools? I mean, I said, raising an eyebrow, you've got to have some other quirks, right? He leaned against the wall, crossing his arms and looking up at the ceiling as if pondering the question. I guess I've always been a bit detached. Like, I'm good at what I do, exploring and all that, but when it comes to, I don't know, making connections? I suck at it. Making connections? I echoed, trying to understand where he was going with this. You mean with people? Or just tools? He shot me a quick look, but there was no anger in it, just resignation. People. I'm good with tools, clearly, he said with a slight smirk, glancing down at the tool in question, still sitting on the bed. But I don't know how to keep people around. Friends, companions, anything real. It was strange to hear him say that. Here I was, thinking the human species was all about relationships, sociable, chatty, full of ridiculous quirks. But he was talking like he didn't fit that mold. Maybe his reputation for laziness went deeper than just not cleaning up after himself. Maybe it had to do with something more personal, something he was still hiding. I thought about that for a moment before responding. You don't think you can have both? Relationships and tools? You can't be serious about both? I didn't mean to make it sound like that. He ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated with his own words. It's just, I've been moving around a lot. I don't stay in one place for long, you know? It's hard to keep people close when you're always traveling. Always moving. It was easy to understand what he meant. I had heard enough about human explorers to know they didn't settle in one place. They roamed, always seeking the unknown, always leaving behind what they couldn't take with them. It wasn't exactly conducive to building long-term connections. But the vulnerability in his voice caught me off guard. He wasn't just making excuses. He was admitting something that most humans, in my experience, would never share. Most would rather hide behind their bravado or their distractions. But Jax was different. There was a sincerity to him, despite all his awkwardness and messiness. I get it, I said after a moment, nodding slowly. It's tough to form connections when you're constantly on the move. But that doesn't mean you can't try. He smiled faintly, but it wasn't a full smile, more like a resigned acceptance. I don't know, maybe. It's just complicated, you know? I do know, I replied softly. But maybe it doesn't have to be. Maybe you don't need to fix everything with a tool. That made him laugh, but it was a dry, half-hearted laugh, like he wasn't sure if I was joking or if I was serious. Well, I can't fix people with a tool. As much as I wish I could, that would probably make things a lot easier. Yeah, but it wouldn't be as much fun, I said with a grin. Sometimes you just need to talk. To really talk. You know, get past the awkward stuff. He hesitated before responding, clearly weighing his words. I don't know how to do that. That's okay, I said with a shrug. You'll figure it out. Just take it one step at a time. He studied me for a moment, as if trying to read between the lines. You seem like you've got it all figured out. I shook my head. Not even close. But I know that trying to avoid everything, just retreating into what you know, isn't going to help. You can't build something meaningful without taking some risks. Risks, huh? He mused. I don't know if I'm good at that. I mean, every time I try to make something work, I just end up messing it up. I chuckled. That's the point. If you don't mess up, then you're not really trying. Besides, what's life without a little chaos? He smiled at that, a real smile this time, and for a second, I saw the person beneath the facade, the human who wasn't just a messy explorer with a weird tool, but someone who was looking for something more. And for the first time, I realized something important. He wasn't as different from me as I had initially thought. So what's your story? He asked, leaning against the wall, his curiosity piqued. How'd you end up here? I didn't expect the question, but it was a fair one. After all, I had asked him about his life, and now he was asking about mine. I wasn't sure how much of my own past I was ready to share, but something about the way he asked made me want to open up. Maybe I didn't have all the answers either. I've been around, I said after a beat, keeping it vague. Traveled. Learned. Experienced things that changed how I see the world, and how I see myself. Sounds like we're both a bit lost then, he said, smiling softly. Maybe we are, I agreed. But I think that's okay. You don't need to have everything figured out to make it work. He nodded slowly, like he was taking the words in, letting them sink in. There was a long silence between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable this time. It was peaceful. Almost like we had reached some kind of understanding. Eventually, I stood up, breaking the stillness. Well, I should probably finish cleaning up your room. Don't want to leave it in worse shape than it already is. He laughed at that, a genuine laugh this time. Yeah, I guess I should start making an effort, huh? That's a start, I said, tossing him a teasing smile. Just make sure you don't leave any more tools lying around. He rolled his eyes, but I saw a glimmer of amusement in his gaze. No promises, but I'll try. I didn't need any more words to know that something had shifted between us. There was still a lot to figure out, a lot of awkward moments to navigate, but for the first time, it didn't seem like a lost cause. Maybe, just maybe, I had found a kindred spirit in the most unlikely of places. And that, I thought, was worth the mess.